Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Crypto Wolf back again, and I don't know, today I just want to talk about something because I keep hearing it come up, and specifically people who don't like crypto tend to bring this one up quite a bit. So I was looking into it a little bit myself just to see, all right, if somebody brings it up to me, like, what leg do I have to stand on in an argument? And I found some interesting data, some interesting information. So it's not going to be terribly long and boring or anything like that. Besides, looking at the chart, Bitcoin's kind of pumping at the moment, so hey, we got that going for us as well. So we'll be keeping an eye on the chart. Matter of fact, since I'm yapping my trap over here, we're gonna take it to the 1 minute so we can just see what's going on, have some candles moving and flickering while we're watching here. Since we're on the 1 minute, look at that real quick. We do have a terrible line for the demonstration I'm trying to do. We have that. While we have that, or you could even stretch it all the way back to here and theoretically say that we have been bearishly diverging, but it is the 1 minute, and you know, you can get some funky stuff on the 1 minute. So if you're trying to hop on some trades real big, you might want to be cautious. If you're on the 1 minute, you may find yourself flopping and groping. But you know, like over here, if we came to the 2 minute, we could see a little bit of bearish divergence as well. So that's what's going on with that. And to the topic of discussion. So I'm going to start right out of the gate by saying something that some people probably wouldn't want to hear, but I really don't care. And that is, no, Bitcoin's energy usage is not killing the world. There, I said it. Does it use a lot of energy? Yeah. Does it use more energy than maybe similar or equivalent systems, particularly processing uses? No, not at all. I mean, don't get me wrong, it uses a lot, but it is not using as much as other somewhat similar things. Now, the big argument that, you know, if you present all this stuff to somebody and they say, oh yeah, Bitcoin mining uses like enough energy to equal the country of Finland, or they're using more than the country of Argentina. And you say, okay, well, a lot of people bring up the fact that, who was it? It was like Galaxy something did some research and found that, you know, just the regular banking system in and of itself uses more. And people say, well, you know, the banking system services a whole lot more people than Bitcoin. Bitcoin only services a very small number of people compared to banking systems and ATMs and all that good stuff. And my argument to that is, well, so what? Okay, is it using more energy per group of person? Yeah, okay, but guess what? A whole lot of other things do too. And at the end of the day, the limited energy argument is kind of stupid because it's limited on purpose. If we stopped limiting it, it wouldn't be a problem now, would it? But I'm not going to get too deep into that. But I do want to show you a couple of little things here. So this is where Bitcoin falls on the chart in comparison to other countries and how much energy it uses, down here by Chile and Bangladesh. So I don't know what year this was, but it's actually less than Finland. Let me see here. I wonder if... Seems like we're not getting the entire picture here. Aspect ratio... Nah, it doesn't really seem all that much better. Ah. Okay. Shrink that down a little bit. So you can see right there that, you know, Bitcoin is pretty far down on the list of countries. Now, the fact that it uses as much as a country, you could argue that, you know, it's just one thing and it uses as much as, you know, thousands and thousands of people. Well, okay, that's life. At the same time, I'd argue that it is also in its infancy. Let's see if I can. Where are we not? Uh-oh, I forgot how to go to the next one. So, just like these other things that I'm about to get into here in a second, we are making a very big push lately toward using renewable energy and things like that. And so right here, here's what types of power that most hashing facilities or Bitcoin mining facilities are using. And the biggest one is actually hydroelectric. So 62%. So if you take, just to give you an idea, here's what the numbers are. And it's actually kind of hard to get some good numbers because depending on where you're getting those numbers from, they can be a little skewed and biased. But the best current number that comes from this Cambridge running Bitcoin energy usage index is 117 terawatt hours. So going back and looking at about a whole bunch of different articles and things, I got everything from 126 to 81 to 80 to 84.6 to 130. So just to give you an idea, and ironically, most of them all cite the exact same source. Now, granted, there's going to be differences depending on which year that we were looking at. Just scoot this over so we can see the chart a little bit. But generally speaking, okay, so let's call it 117. 62% of that is hydroelectric. I mean, that's already a renewable. So you cut 60% of that, we're talking down to mid to high 50 terawatt hours, give or take. And then you got, 30% coal, 38%, geez, coal, which obviously is the big one that most people don't like, despite the fact that they don't really understand the concept of a clean coal plant, but I digress. Natural gas, 36%. Again, one that they generally don't like. Wind is already at 17, which obviously that's going to be variable because wind power kind of sucks, let's be honest. Oil 15, solar 15, nuclear 12, which that one I'm not sure, what is this, September 2020, so it is somewhat fairly recent, although I have heard of some plants taking some action to actually put Bitcoin mining facilities at the plant itself, which is pretty cool, and it's a smart idea on their part because, they can make up some money on some of the trouble that they've been having lately with everybody going after nuclear, which is just stupid. Oh, damn, look at that. We're pumping again. It's going. It's moving. Geothermal 8. That one, kind of weird. 2% other. I'm not entirely sure what other is unless somebody's got some perpetual energy machine out there that they're using to power some Bitcoin mining rigs, which, in that case, hey, share the wealth. But estimated annual energy consumption. My bad, I got to block the screen here a little bit. So when talking about this that Galaxy Digital study that they did, they found that compared to the banking system in general, you got this little sliver, card networks, ATMs, bank branches, but the biggest one on the list is data centers. And I'm going to get into this one just a tad bit deeper, but just looking at this, you can see energy consumption between banking systems. Data centers are essentially just like Bitcoin mining facilities, except there's a whole lot more of them and they're a whole lot bigger. Now, granted, they're probably running from larger data centers, and these data centers tend to have partnerships with companies like Nvidia and Intel, IBM, all that stuff. So they're a little bit more on the cutting edge of the advancements that make it more energy efficient. But all that stuff is going to Bitcoin mining as well. It might be a step behind or a little bit slower, but again, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and crypto and all that stuff is still in its infancy. So, and the fact that they've been making the progress that they have toward being a little bit more efficient, I mean, nobody can argue that. I'm not a big, Gaia climate change gung-ho activist person or anything like that. But I mean, it's a pretty easy thing to say, yeah, we would like energy usage to be a bit more efficient, a bit more less taxing on fuel reserves and things like that. Let's see here. Jump to the next one. Renewables as part of hashing energy mix. Share of hashers. 76% use renewable energies as part of their mix of power sources. Share of total energy consumption. 39% of total energy consumption comes from renewables. Now, this is interesting because we just saw on the previous one here, hydroelectric 62%. Now, are they not counting hydroelectric as renewable? I mean, personally, if you ask me, using water pushed through pipes to spin a turbine and then the water goes back out, you know, downriver, pretty much seems like a renewable to me. Now, granted, yeah, I guess if you're getting droughts and you're not refilling the reservoir above it, maybe it didn't renew. But yeah, I'm gonna call fishiness on that one. And if you've never seen what some of these pretty cool Bitcoin mining facilities look like, I got to give these guys props for the RGB lights that they got going on. I've seen other pictures of this one too, where they like the ceilings and floors have blue and they got little reds going on here and there. It's kind of cool looking. But the biggest use as far as something like this that I have seen is supercomputers. Now, I went and looked up, there's actually, there's a couple lists. There's one that's called the Top 500, which is the 500 most powerful supercomputers. Didn't go too deep into that list, but what they also have is called the Green 500. And that one lists the 500 most efficient supercomputers. Now, granted, this list kind of varies a little bit because, you know, some of them are going to be huge, some of them are going to be tiny. And let's see if I can drag this over to you guys here. So, Green 500, I just went through the top 10, and the top 10 most efficient supercomputers use 25,790 kilowatts. This column right here, but you can see like the number one only has 120,000 cores, whereas number two has 8.7 million cores. So there is a very big size difference between the ones on this list. 1.1 million, 319, 1600, 16,000, 20,000, 26, 47, 20. So you get the picture here that obviously this one's going to use way more than this guy right here. I mean, they even go as low as 53 for a 1600 right there. Now, these Frontier ones are fairly new as well, and they actually have a little blurb about it up here. If you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description. It's kind of interesting. I'm just saying. So, if you were to add up, where did I go here? I lost my damn spot. So, generally speaking, some of these old most powerful supercomputers, the 1000 petaflop supercomputers, had a 2-to-1 performance to power ratio. Like the Tianhe 2, which is the supercomputer from China, this guy right here, uses 500 megawatts, and they're saying it is $1 million to power a 1 megawatt supercomputer for a year. So in this case, $500 million worth of electricity a year. And then you have like the Department of Energy, who was working on 3 of their own that they were trying to keep down to like 10 megawatt, and they were trying to make that like a 10-to-1 performance to power ratio. So obviously there's a lot of development in the supercomputer arena, and they were even hoping to get it to a point of like 50-to-1. But the biggest thing is going to be data centers. You know, most people really don't even know about, haven't heard about, haven't seen, or just don't know jack about data centers. But to give you this perspective, so in 2010, they're saying data centers used 1.5% of electricity. Like, I think it's in the US. Don't quote me on that, but it was like 1.5% of the electricity in the US. Bitcoin, in the highest statistic that I've seen, said like 0.5% to like 0.7 was probably, you know, getting a little ambitious. But they were using and it was hard to get data from certain times, but finally somebody did some good studies and papers and managed to find that they were using 205 terawatt hours in 2018. It was 194 in 2010, which tells you how much the efficiency had evolved just over those 8 years, that it, barely went up. I mean, I say barely, that's a boatload of power. But again, just to rehash, Bitcoin right now is using 117. And if you look at a chart of Bitcoin energy usage, I mean, it basically looks like the S&P 500 before Biden got in office. It's just constantly going up, especially, and most people probably didn't even realize this, since 2021. So just in like a year and a half, Bitcoin energy usage, processing power has basically gone exponential. Not necessarily parabolic, but it's up there. Let me see, I may even be able to, let's see here. There we go. Just to give you guys an idea. Budget. 117, what they're saying, the estimated annual consumption. Then you have this theoretical upper and lower bound, which, depending on how many transactions are being processed, you'll be somewhere within this range. Things are fairly slow at the moment, so I don't imagine it's super high. But power demand, you can kind of see the chart going right there. Total electricity consumption, looking like the S&P 500. And this is that Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index website. So if you're interested in any of that, want to know what the actual numbers are, I will leave that link in the description as well. But as for right now, looking across some potentially more comprehensive studies as far as the data center thing goes, I've even come up with as much as like 90 billion kilowatt hours per year across like all data centers. Pretty big number, but one of the more accurate, I think, was 416 terawatt hours of usage. And they're saying right now, like at least within the last year, that data centers and supercomputers have amounted to about 3% of energy usage. So when they get to talking about Bitcoin like it's the harbinger of death and climate change because it's using so much energy, we're talking 0.5% versus 3%. I don't hear anybody complaining about the fact that Google, Amazon, Yahoo, Microsoft have gigantic data mining centers that are basically just funneling and collecting massive amounts of data. And is that really being used for anything better than Bitcoin? I mean, you could argue in some cases, they're creating AIs and doing all these big models and simulations, but at the same time, you really don't need all of that to do something that we might want them to do as far as simulations. I mean, let's face it, they're using and collecting all of that data, not just to make money, but I don't know if you haven't heard, they reached a point a while back where they literally showed that they could predict future trends. And we've seen it, all the way down to a lower level where, Amazon or your phone would start recommending girls like baby clothes and, infant products before they even knew they were pregnant, just based off of like what they were searching and all that kind of stuff. And I've also heard stories about how they've done this on a very large scale. And I'm probably getting a little off subject here, but just to talk about, the data center thing and why it's using so much energy and why they're so big and use so much processing power. I mean, it's not all, scientific simulations and models and predictions and stuff. I mean, they're very much using it for marketing and, let's call it research purposes. And they flat out stated, some of the people who worked on this stuff, that, yeah, I mean, they were able to essentially predict the future, predict the trends of society and culture and things like that. And so, okay, is that any better than, cryptocurrency, specifically a decentralized blockchain ledger technology. I mean, obviously we've just kind of scratched the surface as to some of the use cases for blockchain and the distributed ledger type, I don't know, systems. So at the same time, again, it's getting more efficient. They're using more and more renewables. So I think anybody arguing about how Bitcoin's so terrible and, New York banning Bitcoin mining and all that stuff, I mean, it's clear that there is another purpose. And that kind of comes back to what it always comes back to. For every subject in the world, there is an official narrative. And let's face it, establishment groups very much dislike crypto and Bitcoin, and anything they dislike, they are going to create the narrative that it's bad, it's terrible, oh, it's not good for you, it's dangerous, it's for organized crime and money laundering and this and that. I mean, get the heck out of here. But as far as the energy thing goes, the real problem, as they scale back on fossil fuel and traditional power sources, they don't like anything with a heavy usage. And so, if Bitcoin is using a lot, they're going to attack it. Because, I mean, keep in mind, the whole green movement thing is basically a religion. And a lot of the people who wrote, the books that kind of kicked it off and really made it popular and all that kind of stuff said the same thing, that it was going to be a new world religion. And like, go back to Agenda 21 and eco-science and all that stuff. But the biggest thing is they don't care about a viable alternative or a comparable replacement being in place before getting rid of the old. And it shows you that they really don't care how it affects people. It's just all about, get rid of fossil fuels, get rid of the old way as soon as possible. The hell if it makes everybody's life miserable or makes it so people end up starving or can't heat their homes in the winter. They don't give a damn. It's a religious fervor, basically. It's, get rid of oil, get rid of gas, and I mean like natural gas. I could get some of the arguments against different parts of it, like with the fracking thing. Yeah, on one hand, it was really good for society and economy and all that stuff. I get some of the effects that it could have on the earth itself, so I'm not really going to take a side on that one. But as far as the fossil fuel stuff, I mean, let's face it, if you start cutting off fossil fuels right now, you're going to kill a buttload of people, flat out. Most people who are like out there in the streets with their little signs, protesting oil companies, and don't get me wrong, I don't like oil companies. I mean, I wouldn't mind betting on them or something, but the people who are generally have the loudest voices in the street don't know jack about it. They didn't even realize the fact that practically everything on their person at that time is available to them because of exactly what they're trying to get rid of. Like, they don't realize that you wouldn't have your iPhone, you likely wouldn't have the same clothes that you have, you wouldn't have your shoes, probably wouldn't have the Sharpie marker that you made your sign with. So I don't know, I guess I'm just venting at this point. But basically my point is that there's always going to be a lot of talk from people who don't like stuff, and at that point it's not even so much that they have a better argument or that they're right. It's just that they hate what they don't like, and they like to hate what they don't like. And so even if by next Friday Bitcoin were to be 100% renewable, 100%, not a single mining rig, computer, facility, anything using anything but renewable, they wouldn't care. They wouldn't. They would still hate it. They would either find something else to hate about it, which they've found plenty, or they just flat out lie and just pretend it didn't happen. they just keep going, oh, it's using so much energy. It's like, well, it's using clean energy. I don't care, it's using so much energy. So, you know, don't take too much from the haters and the naysayers. I suppose that applies to everything in life. But when it comes to this, you know, it's on the right path. You know, especially with, you know, Elon Musk bringing a lot of attention to it. You know, as much as that may have hindered or hurt the market, at the same time, a little bit of growing pains for potentially more efficient usage ain't necessarily a bad thing. And at the same time, you know, we have so many that are proof of stake that when the argument comes up, kind of an easy way to shut them down and be like, well, okay, you don't like Bitcoin, that's proof of work. Well, guess what? There's like 10,000 others that are proof of stake that hardly use any. Like I saw one thing that said Cardano used as much as like a tiny little island with 1,300 people on it in the Pacific. And that's how much they used like a year. So at that point, if anybody's going to try to argue about that, it's like, well, you know, throw your iPhone out. You're using plenty. They used more than enough to make it, along with everything else you have. Like, I don't see, you know, shoving the air conditioning unit out your window. So, yeah, it's easy for people to talk and complain, but at the end of the day, they're not going to change anything about themselves. So, why listen? But I don't know. Yeah, I just, you know, I kept hearing about it, and then they did the thing where they were banning Bitcoin mining in New York, and I was like, all right, you know, let me actually look into this a little bit more, because I know I've heard bits and pieces here and there, and so figured since I looked it up and learned a little bit that I'd share it with you guys. Looks like we might be topping out a little bit. We are on the 2-minute, but that is a son of a bitch. That is a pretty clear bearish divergence right there. Look at that money flow. That was a nice one, though. It was a nice one indeed. You know, popping back up here to the 12-minute. Obviously, we don't see much in the way of divergence yet. And, you know, money flow still generally heading up. RSI still kind of heading up, although there's a potential that it topped right there. I wouldn't go betting on it just yet, but you know, we had a lot of sustainment numbers where we had the 18, 11, 11, 8, 8, 6, 6. So, you know, starting to lose a little bit on the DBSI as well. You know, VWAP took a nice little sideways jaunt. Refused to pass over the zero line just yet, but can't really happen forever, although we do have this nice little trend. So if it does just get a little dip and comes back, we could be back in business. So that's what I'm looking at. And you know what, here, since I don't really talk about any of the higher time frames here, so 4 hour, you know, RSI is just starting to point back together. So it could be a very good sign for tonight into tomorrow. You know, money flow coming back up to the highest it's been since the little bubble right there. And you can see, you know, that one went on for quite a bit longer. If anything, you know, this candle right here is really just only looking like that first one and the pump back there. And very reminiscent, you know, weak pump, little pullback, starting to gain up, spring. Weak pump, little pullback, started to gain up, spring. So we very well could have a little bit of a repeat of what we had back here. It would be nice to see. I guess the big question then is going to be, do we get rejected at that moving average again? See, coming up on the 12 hour, 10, 15, 16, looking nice down there. Potentially a little trigger wave as the money flow goes up. That's some basic strategy for you right there. Getting a little bit of split on the RSI, but you know, it may be a little early on that. We may just repeat what happened right there, even as this generally goes up So I'm feeling a little bullish for the moment. Till something proves otherwise. You know, finally starting to maybe make our way back up on the money flow over here on the daily. I doubt we'll see much on the weekly other than, you know, the big red dot. I mean, sorry, the big green dot. We got the big old BitBoy dot. I swear nobody's ever going to let him live that down. Yeah, just after our little video yesterday about the Heikanashis, you can kind of see what we got going on here. Where it's kind of nice because it shows you this kind of shape right here, as opposed to something like that. Yeah, it just kind of smooths it out a little bit. I mean, you can just generally see what's going on. Just once you kind of learn to read, like, okay, the wicks are kind of doing one of these. All the bodies are kind of smoothly doing one of these. So if you didn't watch it, if you are not super familiar with how the Heikanashis work, check that video out. Should be the previous one to this. And I hope y'all have a fantastic Sunday evening. I guess in some places it's not Sunday evening anymore, is it? But have a wonderful week as we kick it off on a Monday. Back to work. Ugh. All right. Later.